and welcome to the WPP Media Intelligence Podcast. I'm Kate Scott Dawkins. I'm joined today by Jeff Foster. Our colleague Nidhi Shah is somewhere off enjoying the Amalfi Coast, so isn't with us. I don't know. Who has the better deal out of that? I think she does.
It's a tough one, but it is very well deserved for her.
You're sweltering in New York, so I'm sure you'd rather be anywhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty chilly and misty still this morning in the Bay Area. We're getting that definite, I don't have a rhyme for that one. It's May gray, June gloom, which actually May was lovely, but there's no good rhyme for July. July, gray sky. I don't know. Yeah. It'll warm up later.
Yeah, it's like classic Northern California July weather.
We'll get our summer around about October.
Right.
All right, so we have a good, I think, series of topics for today. I was listening to another podcast the other day, and everyone uses the phrase, "We've got so much to get through." I made a mental note not to not to keep saying that in the future.
That makes it sound like it's a chore. It should be enjoyable.
Right. Lots of fun stuff to talk about. We're going to go through some economic news focused on the U.S. We're going to chat through some of the news in the global TV and media space. Specifically, we've got stuff on A&E, Disney-ITV, F1 rights, and then we're going to chat a little bit about some of the themes from our forecast around the future of search and AI, and even some bonus robots stuff at the very end. So if that's your jam, then definitely stick around. We'll get into that in the later part of the show. Sound good?
Let's do it.
All right. So U.S. economic data. There's this sort of narrative right now about a discrepancy between the hard data and the soft data, or data that isn't telling us everything, or even some, I think, justifiable concerns around whether there are going to be future staffing concerns or the ability to collect data going forward and analyze it properly. So we're going to chat through some of the headline numbers and then some of the things I think that are underlying that or color around that, right? So let's start with unemployment figures. We saw those last week dropping to 4.1%.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible run since the beginning of the year that unemployment has been still relatively low, which again, I know we'll discuss a little bit more throughout the podcast, but it seems like there's a very strange disconnect going on between the numbers and what you're anecdotally seeing out there and then what you're reading in the press. It seems like there's like kind of two distinct markets. Obviously, the recent college grad job market's been getting a lot of press, with most colleges having been wrapped up by now, and that market is definitely seeing higher unemployment rates from the data.
Yeah, I looked this up. Q2 was 8.2% for people aged 20 to 24.
20, right.
So it's double the rate of total unemployment.
And I can, confirm that just from friends and family with people who have recently graduated, hearing that, out in the marketplace, which of course, leads to a lot of stories in the press about, is AI sort of eliminating a lot of what were traditionally entry-level jobs? So that narrative is out there. You're hearing this narrative about entry-level jobs now requiring 2 to 5 years of experience. It's it just seems like this a very bifurcated market in some sense.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of headline news, especially here in the Bay Area, about tech layoffs too, I think, across some of the major technology players. Hard to know. I can put on my skeptics hat, and maybe they're saying it's because they're becoming more efficient due to AI, which that may be part of it. Some of it may still be this hangover from overhiring in prior years when there were boom times, and now we're still kind of sloughing off and right sizing.
Yeah.
Or that these are the early signs of actually demand is down. The U.S. economy is slowing down, and these layoffs are actually part of that. No one's announcing it as such, because that's not a good narrative to have out in the marketplace.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, what's really going on is somewhere in the middle of that Venn diagram circle of all those causes. I think it's, there's been a lot of articles out there too about how, efficiency and downsizing is the new strategy for companies. They just don't want to come out and really admit that.
Yeah.
That AI is a little bit more prevalent. I think it was the CEO of Ford who mentioned that AI is going to be way more prevalent and way more disruptive than people think. Then you have other people saying, no, it's not the case. So it's just hard to kind of parse all of this. And I think it's going to vary widely industry by industry as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's right long term. If it was Farley at Ford who said that, I
Right.
think that's directionally right and right long term. And the question is just how quickly are we going to get there? And that goes back to again the themes we discussed in the report around whether you believe superintelligence is sort of right around the corner or these models are still just applying a ton of rules and they're not quite there. So up
Yeah,
for debate still.
exactly.
What else do we have? Let's talk about purchases, consumer spending, credit. How healthy is the US consumer, Jeff?
Well, again, I think it depends on who you ask. We are definitely seeing some signs in there that are beginning to show some cracks. But I mean, relatively, it's still fairly strong. Of course, the elephant in the room is what's going on with interest rates, tariffs. It's sort of the perfect storm of all of that. But yeah, I think as we get more data in the second half, we'll have a better idea.
Yeah, I think there was some pre-loaded buying ahead of tariffs, maybe, and then it slowed down. Let's see, revolving credit, so mostly credit card
Cards, yeah.
debt was 3.2% down in May after a 6.9% gain in the prior month. So that's kind of
Right.
people are maybe holding off on some of those purchases, trying to spend less, waiting to see where the economy is headed, whether rates do come down in the back half of the year or just how much prices are going to increase on goods as we do come into this kind of I was going to say second round of tariff announcements. I don't even know what it is at this point.
Yeah, I've lost count.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think that indicates that, I think it's a lot of waiting and seeing right now, especially for large, obviously I think it's gonna be a little bit different for everyday kind of CPG type of goods that you need, but on
Yeah.
larger purchases, that sort of thing, I think just seems like there's gonna be a lot of waiting and seeing. I mean, especially looking at on autos, it definitely seems to be slowing down a little bit, and
Although
cars
now
are
with,
reaching a $50,000 average
yeah.
price, and this is before we really started seeing the impact of tariffs.
For EVs, though, if you look at
Yeah.
people who are in the market and that tax credit starts to go away at the end
Hmm.
of September, we may see a bit of pull forward in auto purchases, at least EVs, in this period.
Yeah.
People trying to make sure they get that benefit before it gets taken away.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. What else? One of the things we always look at is new business formations. The US gives pretty good data on this, and it's still elevated versus pre-COVID. So there are more than 450,000 new business applications in June. That's just the total adjusted number. I think it's not the high propensity number or the number that have employees, but it's a good just sort of metric to keep an eye on. I think partially how optimistic people are, and then also how many new kinds of companies might be coming into the industry that might eventually become advertisers, right? And then I was looking at the types. Actually, manufacturing business applications were up 2.4%
Which
in May.
makes sense. Yeah, I could
Or
that
2.4% versus May. Sorry. So these are June
right.
numbers versus May.
Right.
Retail applications, that's still the largest number. Retail trade up 6.1% versus May. Information business applications up 3.7%. Educational services up 5.8%. I think that's a big area of disruption
Yeah.
for AI. So, I mean, not to say that's why that is reading into the numbers, but I thought that was a pretty big spike
Yeah.
or big number gain. And then arts and entertainment up 3.4%, nearly 14,000 new
Wow.
business applications in the
Are
arts and
these
entertainment in June, the fifth
Yeah.
most ever for the data going back to 2005.
Wow. Is this the creator economy in full effect here? Is that what we're
So
seeing?
maybe generative
Yeah.
AI stuff, maybe,
Yeah.
right? That's why it's so interesting. You don't always know exactly what the numbers are telling you straight away, but it's always fun to geek out and see
Yeah.
what's available and what you might be able to figure out by looking at it. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And then the one other piece I have here, manufacturers order, new orders for manufactured goods in May up 5 of the last 6 months, they increased 48.5 billion or 8.2% to 642 billion from the U.S. Census Bureau. So, that followed a 3.9% April decrease. So it looks like people are, again, sort of figuring out this in-between phase between tariff announcement in April and then sort of the next round, what we're starting to hear in the news this week and into the coming weeks as well.
Yeah, that's sure what it suggests to me as well. I think, it's a little hard to parse through the noise, but I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. All right. So did we answer any questions or we just added a lot of equivocations? Who knows?
Exactly.
Let's shift into media entertainment news. There's always stuff going on in this part of the world, which is really our main focus within the name is media intelligence, right? So what happened?
This is our jam. So, so came out this week that A&E is for sale. This is an interesting one because it's a joint venture between Disney and Hearst. So it's a 50-50 split right now for them. It's the parent company of A&E Network, History, and Lifetime. They're privately held, and so they don't disclose financials. But of course, this adds more data points, more fuel to the fire about the cable business in the U.S. just rapidly changing. A&E is an interesting one because they own a pretty big library. They have been investing in content. Lifetime does really well. They have a huge library of they're pretty well known for like their Christmas movies and their holiday theme movies, and it does very well. So it's going to be interesting to see, if this gets folded in, consolidated into one of the other cable channels, whether it's the NBCU spinoff, the Turner, if there's the Paramount cable networks, which are still TBD.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. Disney, they never really fully, I guess, integrated it since it was a joint venture. So it was never available on Disney Plus. So there's a lot of opportunity there. It's just going to be, it's definitely a business that has challenges, but there's also some upside there too.
I think content maybe feels like it fits the best with the Warner Brothers spinoff. I mean, you could see History, Discovery, Lifetime sort of all being maybe attractive to the same kind of audience.
Yeah, that would seem to make some sense.
Who knows? All right. We'll keep an eye out on that one. I mean, selfishly, I would love for it to go to a public company so that we can start integrating the data.
Right. Yeah, that would be very nice.
The more data, the better. Cool. And then we also had Disney and ITV. We've talked about this, but in the world of media, we're seeing a lot of divestitures, consolidations, moving and trying to figure out, I think, for the most part, people understand that streaming is the way forward for especially premier content, big budget content, and then it's figuring out how to make the economics work, right?
Yeah, I think that pretty much seems to be the prevailing strategy.
And for those outside of the big four, it's how do we compete and survive in this world where we don't have $20 billion budgets to spend on content every year.
Exactly, which leads us to seeing more of these kind of partnership type of deals or content sharing type of deals, which is what we just saw with this Disney-ITV partnership. So they announced a first of its kind content sharing deal. So each platform will offer a curated selection of the other shows under the banner A Taste Of. So for example, on Disney, it will be A Taste of ITVX, and on ITVX, it will be A Taste of Disney Plus. So it's an interesting way to get to access each other's audiences. So Disney Plus will feature ITV hits like Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, Spy Amongst Friends, and Select Love Island, which is here in the US, I would say off the charts on viral and popularity right now. And then ITVX will host Disney titles such as the first seasons of The Bear, Andor, Only Murders in the Building, and then reality shows like The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and The Kardashians. So it's an interesting, crossover. About 170 to 100 hours of content from each service will be shared at launch. And this is launching next week, so it's happening soon. And, you're already seeing this in the US where, under the same parent company at Disney, Hulu will have like a Taste of Disney Plus show. So if you don't subscribe to Disney Plus, you can see some select content for whether it's Star Wars or Marvel or some shows and
Right.
select movies. So you can see this where it's kind of going.
I'm sure I saw Channel 4 also this week. And now we'll pick up on that one maybe next week. But yeah, I think this is going to be more and more probably common as we get into what exactly a reaggregation looks like.
Yeah, I agree too. And it was interesting in the announcement too. They also mentioned how Disney Plus is exploring similar partnerships in other European markets.
Yeah.
So I think, it makes a lot of sense where you have a lot of these smaller, markets that, if they could partner up with Disney Plus, it's could definitely provide a nice revenue stream.
Yeah, I mean, there are different levels of this, right? So there's going into the content owner, right? And then I think the other one is, and which this is similar, I think, to the, TIFF on Netflix being
Right.
within that. And then the other level of integration and aggregation then is making your content and sort of more apps available on, say, Amazon's system or as a tile or in, Google or the Google TV OS or the Apple TV OS, right? So I think we're going to be seeing lots of trials across all of these various ways to see what's the most profitable and easy to execute.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, from our standpoint, I would love to see the details of the deal, how the revenue split works, how the advertising works, but I don't think we'll be getting at any level of that detail anytime soon.
Probably unlikely.
Yeah.
We can set up a tip line somehow.
Right, exactly.
Awesome. The other piece I highlighted, this came from our friend of the pod, Stephen Kale at Wells Fargo. He wrote about the F1 rights, saying, originally from Sports Business Journal, but saying that Apple is in talks for US F1 rights at 150 to 200 million per year, which compares to ESPN's current 25 contract exit value of 85 million. So, they already have MLS. They're being quite specific, I guess, about what sports they're going after and what makes sense for them. This isn't necessarily a big subscription driver, or maybe it is. They'd probably argue for more exclusivity than ESPN currently has, was the thinking.
Right.
But it's a little bit different than, say, Amazon's, big bid for NFL high viewership or Netflix's big fights kind of strategy.
Yeah, and also important to note that the F1 movie produced by Apple, which just came out and has done pretty well, so you can see the synergy on that side. But yeah, I think this is just more evidence in these relatively smaller sports, and seeing their rights just exploding in value and just a huge demand for this still.
It is. I mean, we sit in the US and every once in a while I see a news piece out of Europe or somewhere. The rights monies are not expanding there the same way they are here. Just they don't. And even this is talking about the sort of lower ad load within F1, right? Which makes it a little bit less attractive maybe to some potential buyers. And I think that's broadly true across most of the European soccer or football rights as well, right? So there is really still that dichotomy. Between the way the monetization works in Europe and here in the US.
Right, especially with soccer, football being so popular worldwide, just not quite as tailored for commercial breaks as a lot of the US sports are.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So there was quite a bit of news this week around the future of search, the future of web browsing, all the rest of that. There was Reuters reporting about Perplexity AI saying that it has launched Comet, a new web browser with AI-powered search capabilities. So from that article, it enables users, or from the release, I guess, it enables users to ask questions, perform tasks, and conduct research in a single unified interface. The browser integrates a built-in assistant that can compare products, summarize content, book meetings, and transform complex workflows into simple conversational experiences. So currently available to subscribers who pay $200 per month for Perplexity Max, with broader access rolling out via invite over the summer. And then there was also reporting that this is, rumored to be something OpenAI is planning to roll out as well. They've hired a couple of folks from Google's Chrome team. I think the reporting is that they're building it on the Chromium open source code, right? So interesting, right? We could see a lot more competition in the browser space than we have in quite some time.
So we're back to web-based browsers, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, within
Right.
apps potentially, right? Or both.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But really interesting, and we're furthering kind of that conversation of the death of the web, or the
Hmm.
web monetization model, where publishers relied on allowing crawlers to look at their text and content in return for traffic being
Hmm.
driven to those sites, right?
Right.
Which brings us to the third piece of this, and then I think we can sort of discuss all together. Cloudflare, which says it manages, I think, 20% of traffic for the web, announced that it's going to provide infrastructure to block AI crawlers accessing content without permission or compensation by default. So publishers would be able to select whether they wanted to allow, at least according to the current version, search crawlers versus AI crawlers. Now, I think since then I've seen some other reporting that that's not necessarily that that's currently possible. That was a bit aspirational,
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
might require cooperation from some of these companies, which, not sure that would be very forthcoming, but I think really commendable in terms of trying to figure out ways to make sure future crawling is consented or monetizable in some way by these companies that are investing in reporters and creators and artists and all the rest of this, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I can see having my sort of publisher hat on, how, if I have all this content out there on the web and these LLMs are picking it up, yeah, I can see where it could be a little, frustrating that my content is then being used in, who knows what. It's how it's getting put back. So I think it's interesting if it, if it all plays out, that it could get put a little bit more control, at least back in the publishers, and they could actually choose to opt in or find a way to maybe monetize it a little bit better.
I mean, it's like a giant tug of war, right? So every time you like the announcement of the AI browsers puts it a little bit more the
Right.
AI side. Cloudflare's maybe pulls it a bit back the other way. You also have all of the recent court cases around AI copyright. This is a fascinating place. I don't know if anyone spends quite as much time as, as I have recently reading about these cases, but two quite divergent points of view from my reading and some of the analysis that I've been looking at around what the important considerations are in terms of AI copyright. A couple of rulings that went in the favor of the large language model companies. One, though, so the case in which there were a number of authors suing Meta over use of their works, where the judge you could tell, like, sort of wanted to rule in their favor, but couldn't on the basis of the law, like didn't believe they brought the right argument. But there was a previous ruling the week before that also basically sided with the AI companies and said, the threat to commercials of this technology isn't really there. And that, I think in his writing, this is roughly the comparison, so apologies if I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but basically large language models reading books and using them for training could be compared to giving school children novels to read that they may then eventually grow up and write their own novels,
Right.
right?
Right.
The second judge in the Meta case basically said that that misses the point of scale, and I think maybe Ben Thompson wrote in some of this too in his blog Stratechery, around the idea that it wasn't the same because large language models had the ability to churn out millions of books
Right.
that would actually impact the commercial viability of individual authors, right?
Right.
And even though any one book wasn't critical to training the large language model, that as a whole, the business model could potentially be disruptive or impactful. So we haven't seen the end of this. All of these things are
Right.
interacting and all
Yeah.
happening at the same time. And it's a fascinating point in history to be where we are
is.
right now.
I mean, it almost feels like what's old is new again, because I mean, obviously, this is a lot larger scale with AI than anything in the past. But when you look at content or art in general, look at how many pieces of content, whether it's music, film, literature, has been informed by someone and being inspired or reading books, or seeing a film or TV shows. But as you said, it's just on a major scale.
Yeah, there's only so much content one person can produce
Exactly.
if they're painting something themselves or writing their own books.
Right.
Yeah, versus a large language model that could churn out
Yeah,
I don't
an
even know,
infinite
a
amount of
million
content.
novels a
Yeah,
day. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So it is a different level of competition, right, which I think was
Yeah,
the argument. So we'll see if now those authors can't bring that same case, I don't think, or at least not on the same grounds, but it'll be interesting to see if that gets picked up and then brought again with a different argument that leans into the judge's eventual ruling and what he wrote in that.
right. Yeah.
Whew, fascinating. Lots happening in the world of media and content. My bonus piece for the day is about robots. So, Hugging Face announced on their blog that they would be producing and shipping an inexpensive mini robot so that more people have access to coding for robots. I think could be very cool. My husband is a software engineer, and so he's worked on coding with our kids. And I think having this as a way to actually manipulate a physical thing and teach coding to yourself or a classroom or your kids, I think is very cool. It's called the Ricci Mini. $300 for the light version, which is tethered, or $450 for the onboard computing wireless version. Compare that to, I mean, Tesla's Optimus is rumored to be tens of
Yeah.
thousands of
Yeah.
dollars. These are
Yeah.
normally not inexpensive at all. So, yeah, I mean, fascinating. I think especially if we look back to our survey, right, our Advertising in 2030 survey, where we asked our expert panel whether 5% of households globally would have humanoid robots by 2030. 60% said it was highly unlikely. So just 1 to 2 out of a scale of 10. Now, that's, it's very pessimistic about that option. To break it down, there are roughly 2.5 billion households globally. So 5% of that would be 125 million robots over the next 5 years. Apple sells roughly, 230 million
Hmm.
iPhones or something each
Yeah.
year. So, and that, if we were talking about, a cost factor that's maybe 250, 500 to $1,000 versus $20,000, that starts to become, maybe more likely. Now, an 11-inch semi-humanoid
Yeah.
robot is a little bit different than like a full
Right.
size
Fully.
one,
Yeah.
but I do think maybe there was some underestimation about how quickly this space could evolve as
Could have,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. I agree. I mean, it's cute. It looks like a Pixar, Disney, very Wall-E kind of
It's got
inspired little robot.
antennae.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having like like a pet or somebody staring at you on the desktop. You can have a conversation with all day. It's pretty cool. But you're right. I think it's still in the early stages. But I think it shows, like, for proof of concept that it can be scaled at a relatively inexpensive rate. And this one doesn't have arms or legs, so it probably can't do household chores. But
Yeah.
it's not that
But
far off.
in terms of educating developers
It
and
looks
getting them to play
amazing.
around with it so
Yeah.
that they could then think, well, actually, here's an idea now maybe I could do because I have access to this as a learning platform. Really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. Like, especially from the educational point of view, and I'm sure people can think of some incredibly creative things to do with it. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. Maybe our experts missed the mark on this one. We'll
We'll
see.
see. We'll see. I also saw a note that OpenAI and maybe Anthropic, a couple others, are starting a training program for the teachers, one of the teachers' unions. So
Yeah.
trying to get
Okay.
more AI experience in education into the hands of
Yeah.
educators across the US as well. So really interesting. All right. What are we looking forward to next week? Weekend plans next week. We have retail media data. We have CPI data, I think. So another big one.
Yeah, gearing up for earnings, of course. It's
Is
yeah.
Netflix next week already? I think.
Let's see.
I think it's next Thursday
I
already.
think some of the banks are going next
Oh,
week,
yeah.
right?
The banks and then Netflix, usually the early one.
Yeah.
Whew, already. I feel like we just got through this year, next year, and earnings, and it's back again.
Yeah, it flies by very fast.
Man. All right. Well, we'll break it all down for our listeners next week. Excellent. Stay cool over there.
Yeah, just dying to turn the air conditioning back on here.
All right. As a reminder, the Media Intelligence podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as financial advice. Thanks for listening.